Hollywood's golden age didn't just sparkle with gowns and tuxedos, it also carried secrets that made censors furious. Beneath the bright lights, filmmakers slipped in glances, touches, and stories that hinted at love between women. And guess what? That was enough to spark bans around the world. So, which films were considered too much even when nothing was said outright? Stay tuned, because what passed as harmless entertainment hid more than audiences were ready for. Queen Christina, 1933. Imagine Greta Garbo walking into history draped not in a gown, but in a doublet. In Queen Christina, she plays Sweden's legendary monarch who defied marriage and tradition, choosing power and independence over domestic life. The film became famous for one unforgettable moment, Garbo kissing her lady-in-waiting goodbye with a tenderness so electric, censors didn't know what to do with it. Some countries cut the scene entirely, while others banned the picture altogether, calling it inappropriate for audiences. The irony? Garbo's own life mirrored her role. Off-screen, she lived privately and on her own terms, fueling rumors with a mysterious aura. Letters later revealed her close bond with playwright Mercedes de Acosta, which only deepened the film's reputation as something more than a historical drama. For contemporary viewers, the scene wasn't just a gesture, it was recognition, coded but unmistakable. Box office success didn't protect it from bans. The mere idea of a woman in royal power choosing love and companionship outside the expected boundaries sent cultural watchdogs into panic mode. Today, the film is celebrated not only as a classic period piece, but also as one of the earliest Hollywood films to give queer-coded love a visible heartbeat. Queen Christina proved that sometimes a sideways glance could be more radical than 1,000 words. Morocco, 1930. Picture it. A smoke-filled cabaret. Marlene Dietrich, in a below-so tuxedo, tilting her hat and leaning in to kiss another woman. That single moment in Morocco set cinema history on fire. This was pre-code Hollywood, but even then, the audacity of a female lead openly showing affection for another woman shocked audiences. Some countries outright banned the film, declaring it too bold for public consumption. Dietrich's character, Amy Jolly, wasn't just a singer, she was a walking revolution. In real life, Marlene was famous for ignoring conventions, dressing in suits, and owning her androgynous charm. On screen, she stared at men and women with the same intensity, collapsing traditional rules of desire into pure charisma. Critics tried to frame it as just a performance, but audiences knew better. What makes Morocco unforgettable is not only that daring kiss, but how it redefined female agency. Amy doesn't wait for approval. She follows her desires. When she throws away her shoes to chase Gary Cooper's soldier into the desert, it wasn't submission, it was her choice. The fact that the movie still earned impressive profits, even with bans and edits, shows audiences were captivated rather than deterred. Decades later, that single tuxedo kiss is still considered one of Hollywood's most groundbreaking moments. Sylvia Scarlett, 1935. Katharine Hepburn was never one for rules, and Sylvia Scarlett proved it. Here, she spends most of the film disguised as a boy named Sylvester, cutting her hair short, dressing in trousers, and living as a male companion. The disguise works for a while, until women start to fall for her. And when Hepburn's character shows hints of enjoying that attention, Hollywood censors turn pale. Directed by George Cukor, himself a closeted figure in Hollywood, the film became a playground for bending gender expectations. In one particularly memorable moment, a young woman swoons for Sylvester, and Hepburn's response is more than curious. It's affectionate. The censors may have missed it, but audiences didn't. Whispers spread quickly, and some theaters refused to screen it. International boards were even harsher, labeling the film immoral and cutting it from distribution. Though the movie bombed commercially, its legacy endures as one of the earliest films to put queer-coded desire right in the middle of a mainstream story. Off-screen, Hepburn's life only amplified speculation. She was famously independent, lived unconventionally, and maintained close relationships with women throughout her career. With Sylvia Scarlett, she left a cinematic marker that said, "Breaking the mold isn't failure, it's history." Dracula's Daughter, 1936. Universal Studios tried to cash in on the success of Dracula, but what they unleashed in Dracula's daughter was far more controversial than they anticipated. This sequel introduced Countess Maria Zaleska, a vampire who, instead of chasing men, lures women into her dark orbit. One scene in particular drew fire from censors. The Countess invites a young model to her studio, asks her to pose, and gazes at her with an intensity that went far beyond friendly. The production code office demanded rewrites and cuts, but even the toned-down version couldn't escape accusations of being suggestive. In several countries, the movie was outright banned, while others forced trims that gutted entire sequences. Yet the image of a female vampire desiring another woman was impossible to erase. It became the blueprint for decades of lesbian vampire films that followed in Europe. Gloria Holden, who played the Countess, delivered a performance both tragic and defiant, portraying a woman torn between rejecting her desires and embracing them. For audiences in the 1930s, this wasn't just horror, it was something far scarier to the moral guardians of the time: female independence linked to forbidden desire. Dracula's daughter didn't just add to monster mythology, it carved out an early controversial chapter in queer cinematic history. Salome, 1922. Long before Hollywood perfected its gloss, Alla Nazimova brought raw audacity to the screen with Salome. Funded with her own money, this adaptation of Oscar Wilde's play was drenched in avant-garde visuals, gender-fluid costumes, and a cast rumored to be entirely made up of queer actors. From its release, it was too much for censors, who quickly banned or restricted it in multiple territories. Nazimova's Salome isn't the standard biblical temptress. She's a character moving through an atmosphere of desire that ignores boundaries, with every costume and gesture hinting at a world where women could crave each other openly. Critics dismissed it as bizarre, audiences didn't know what to make of it, and financial disaster followed. But historically, it was groundbreaking. Nazimova herself lived boldly, hosting legendary gatherings at her Garden of Allah estate, a safe haven for queer Hollywood long before the word was publicly acknowledged. The film's stylized set designs, inspired by Aubrey Beardsley's illustrations, created a dreamlike stage where queerness wasn't hidden in shadows, but boldly illuminated. Though it ended Nazimova's career as a producer, Salome stands as one of the first true cinematic declarations of women loving women. Its bans only cemented its status as too daring for its time, yet essential for ours. Grand Hotel, 1932. At first glance, Grand Hotel looks like pure star-studded glamour. Greta Garbo brooding, Joan Crawford smoldering, and John Barrymore sweeping across lavish Berlin sets. But look closer and you'll see why some censors bristled. Crawford's stenographer character didn't just use her charm on men. Her chemistry with Garbo was so strong, audiences whispered about it even though the two never shared a scene together. In countries with stricter morality boards, the whole picture was either banned or heavily trimmed, supposedly for being suggestive. Behind the curtains, the gossip mill only amplified things. Garbo's private life was already a hot topic, as was Crawford's habit of surrounding herself with close female companions. When their names ended up on the same credit list, the unspoken conversation around the film doubled. Add in Crawford's biting independence on screen, where she coolly maneuvers through situations, and the rumors practically wrote themselves. Critics may have focused on the film's ensemble style, but for sharp-eyed audiences, the subtle tension between Garbo's aloofness and Crawford's magnetic presence created a dynamic that was too intriguing to ignore. That "I want to be alone" line, though spoken by Garbo, felt like a shared mantra for women guarding private lives in a world that wanted exposure. Grand Hotel wasn't banned everywhere, but where it was, the excuse was clear. Too much female power, too much unspoken closeness. Merrily We Live, 1938. Screwball comedies weren't supposed to raise eyebrows, but Merrily We Live did. Actress Patsy Kelly played a wisecracking maid with a no-nonsense edge. What audiences didn't know, or maybe they did, was that Kelly wasn't hiding who she was off-screen. She openly lived with her female partner, a fact that put her on every studio's problem list. Kelly's screen persona was bold and brassy, often poking fun at the privileged families she worked for in films. That edge wasn't just acting, It was her lived reality. In Merrily We Live, she steals scenes with sharp remarks and body language that gave her character a certain independence most female roles at the time avoided. The censors didn't like it, and neither did conservative audiences. In some places, the film got pulled, not because of the storyline, but because Kelly's presence was deemed inappropriate. The truth was simple. Hollywood didn't know what to do with someone so open in an era of secrecy. While leading ladies played the glamour game, Kelly cracked jokes about not needing a man, and it struck nerves. By the mid-40s, her career slowed drastically, but her performance in Merrily We Live remains a rare gem, proof that authenticity, even in comedy, could spark bans. Today, Kelly is remembered as one of the few who never hid, and this film captures her at her peak. Dance, Girl Dance, 1940. Dorothy Arzner made history as the only woman directing major studio films in Hollywood during the 30s and 40s. Her movie Dance, Girl Dance wasn't just about ballerinas in burlesque, it was about women seeing women. In one unforgettable moment, Maureen O'Hara confronts an audience for objectifying her, declaring, "I'm looking at you too." For censors, that line, paired with lingering close-ups between the female leads, felt a little too direct. Some countries banned the picture for indecency. Arzner herself lived openly with her partner, choreographer Marion Morgan, and her perspective shaped the movie. She slipped in gazes and pauses that male directors of the time would never think to include. The result was a film that critics dismissed as odd, but later scholars celebrated as a groundbreaking piece of feminist and queer cinema. The irony? It flopped when it was released, overshadowed by flashier productions. Yet the ban in some markets only cemented its reputation as dangerous. Looking back, you can see what was really happening. Arzner was rewriting the rules. Dance, Girl Dance wasn't about romance with men, it was about how women related to each other, for better or worse. And for that reason, it rattled the censors more than any risque gown ever could. Lifeboat. 1944. Trust Alfred Hitchcock to trap a group of survivors in a single boat and turn it into a pressure cooker. But in Lifeboat, it wasn't just the suspense that stirred up trouble. It was Tallulah, Bankhead. She played a glamorous journalist stranded at sea, barking orders, smoking endlessly, and stealing the spotlight in every frame. Bankhead wasn't shy about her private life, and her reputation followed her onto the screen. Rumors flew that she shocked crew members by refusing undergarments, leading Hitchcock to crack one of his famously dry jokes. But it was her commanding energy that really unsettled some audiences. She was too bold, too flirtatious with both men and women in her performance, and too unwilling to tone herself down. In more conservative territories, the film was trimmed, censored, or outright banned. Bankhead's real-life personality blurred with her role. She was sharp, witty, and openly flirted with women at a time when doing so could end a career. On screen, that same unfiltered energy translated into a character who refused to be boxed in by society's expectations. Lifeboat didn't just give Hitchcock a new playground. It gave audiences a view of a woman breaking rules with every line, every glance. No wonder some places thought it was too much. Rebecca, 1940. Few films capture obsession quite like Alfred Hitchcock's Rebecca. The central love story between the young bride and her brooding husband might have passed censorship easily. But it was Mrs. Danvers, the housekeeper, who caused the uproar. Played with chilling intensity by Judith Anderson, Danvers' fixation on the late Rebecca crossed lines censors didn't want crossed. She caresses Rebecca's clothes, whispers about her beauty, and treats her memory like a sacred love. It was impossible to miss the undertones. The production code office debated cutting entire sequences, but Hitchcock was clever. He trimmed just enough to pass inspection while leaving the obsession fully intact. In some regions, though, the film was banned outright, declared unnatural by moral guardians. Ironically, that only made audiences more eager to see it. Rebecca went on to win the Academy Award for Best Picture, proving that audiences didn't just tolerate the subtext, they were fascinated by it. Hitchcock knew exactly what he was doing, and Judith Anderson delivered one of cinema's earliest and most unforgettable queer-coded villains. For all its bans, Rebecca remains proof that sometimes suggestion is more powerful than anything said out loud. Caged, 1950. Prison films were always marketed as gritty realism, but Caged took that grittiness into territory censors hated. The story follows Marie Allen, a young woman sent to prison after a botched robbery leaves her widowed. Inside, she faces brutal conditions, corrupt guards, and an environment simmering with unspoken desire. What made the movie controversial wasn't the violence. It was the way relationships between women were hinted at through lingering touches and power games. The most unforgettable figure is the stern matron played by Hope Emerson. Her dominance over inmates carried a weight that audiences of the time instantly recognized, even if the censors tried to deny it. In one scene, the camera pans away just before things get too suggestive, a clear sign the production code was on high alert. But in some international territories, the film was still deemed immoral and banned outright. Caged was praised for Eleanor Parker's haunting performance, which earned her an Oscar nomination. But moral watchdogs latched onto its coded portrayals of women bonding too deeply in confinement. The bans didn't stop its reputation. Over time, the film has been reassessed as one of the boldest examples of how studios used prison walls to contain but also reveal female closeness. Caged wasn't just a crime drama, it was a mirror to anxiety society wasn't ready to face. Too Late for Tears, 1949. At first glance, Too Late for Tears plays like a textbook film noir. A mysterious bag of money, a scheming femme fatale, and a series of betrayals that spiral out of control. But what set it apart, and led to bans in certain places, wasn't just the plot. Much of the controversy revolved around its star, Lizabeth Scott. At the height of her career, gossip magazines smeared her with lurid headlines about her personal life, painting her as a woman who didn't conform to expectations. Those rumors stuck, and they colored the way censors and studios treated her work. On screen, Scott delivered one of her fiercest performances as Jane Palmer. Unlike typical noir heroines who wielded charm to win a man's affection, Jane was driven by pure ambition. She manipulated, plotted, and coolly brushed aside anyone who stood in her way. She wasn't searching for romance, she was chasing control. That independence, paired with Scott's off-screen reputation, gave the film a reputation as indecent in the eyes of moral watchdogs, leading to bans and cuts in some territories. At the time, Too Late for Tears didn't get the recognition it deserved. Distribution problems and the shadow of scandal kept it from reaching a wide audience, and box office numbers fizzled. But the story didn't end there. Decades later, the film was restored, and critics began to recognize it as one of noir's hidden treasures. Today, Jane Palmer isn't seen as just a villain. She's viewed as a coded figure of rebellion, embodying women who refuse to play by rules written for them. What once made the film dangerous is now what makes it fascinating. Too Late for Tears shows how a single performance can challenge the boundaries of an era and leave a lasting mark. Calamity Jane, 1953. Few musicals from Hollywood's golden age have stood the test of time quite like Calamity Jane, with Doris Day playing the fearless, sharp-shooting frontierswoman. On the surface, it's a light-hearted romp full of cowboy antics, bright songs, and romantic triangles. But beneath the laughter and prairie charm, there was something else, something censors noticed immediately. The friendship between Jane and Katie Brown, played by Alan McLaury, carried a warmth that audiences recognized as more than ordinary. One of the most telling moments comes during their duet, A Woman's Touch. The two women decorate a rustic cabin together, singing in perfect harmony while sharing smiles, touches, and domestic bliss. To modern eyes, the scene plays like a couple creating their first home. Even more striking was Doris Day's heartfelt delivery of Secret Love, a ballad about finally being able to share one's deepest feelings. It wasn't long before queer audiences embraced it as an anthem, while nervous censors frowned at its intensity. In fact, in several territories, the film was banned or criticized for sending the wrong message. But the backlash couldn't stop its popularity. Calamity Jane became a box office success and even won the Academy Award for Best Original Song. Doris Day herself later admitted she understood why fans saw it as a coded romance, even if the studio had intended otherwise. That's what makes Calamity Jane remarkable. Hidden inside the technicolor sheen of a musical comedy was a story that resonated with viewers searching for something different. The bands only confirmed what audiences already suspected. This was more than just another Western musical. It was a tale where subtext glowed brighter than the prairie sun, leaving a legacy that endures decades later. Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. 1953. Howard Hawks' glittering musical Gentlemen Prefer Blondes promised audiences diamonds, glamour, and romance. But what they got was something even more lasting: the dazzling bond between Marilyn Monroe and Jane Russell. Monroe's Lorelei Lee and Russell's Dorothy Shaw might have chased wealthy suitors on paper, yet their chemistry with each other was the heart of the film. Censors noticed, and some international boards found the relationship too close, trimming or banning screenings. One of the boldest numbers, Ain't There Anyone Here for Love, features Russell singing as she strolls among half-clothed athletes. Rather than swooning, she treats the men like set pieces, her focus playful but detached. It flips the usual Hollywood dynamic, making her indifference toward male bodies part of the joke. Add in Monroe and Russell's constant hand-holding, shared looks, and protective behavior, and the subtext was impossible to miss. Critics tried to dismiss it as sisterly affection, but audiences knew better. In territories with stricter moral codes, officials claimed the movie promoted independence from men, which for the 1950s was enough to spark bans. Ironically, that independence is exactly what gave the film its enduring power. Despite censorship, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes was a massive hit, grossing millions and cementing Monroe as a star. But its true magic lies in the way Lorelei and Dorothy stick together through everything: diamonds, courtroom troubles, and romantic complications. For many viewers, the men are side characters, while the women's friendship is the real treasure. All About Eve, 1950. When All About Eve arrived, it was hailed as a razor-sharp look at ambition and aging on the Broadway stage. Bette Davis delivered fire as Margot Channing, but the controversy swirled around Anne Baxter's Eve Harrington. Eve's devotion to Margot wasn't just admiration, it read as fixation. The way she gazed, the way she clung, the way she inserted herself into Margot's life carried an undercurrent that unsettled censors. Some territories banned the film outright, calling the relationship unnatural. Others cut dialogue that hinted at Eve's obsession. Yet those edits only heightened curiosity. Audiences leaned into the subtext, reading Eve's motives as more than professional. For queer viewers, the story wasn't just about rivalry, it was about the dangerous edge of desire hidden in plain sight. The Academy loved it, handing the film 14 nominations and 6 wins, including Best Picture. But beyond trophies, All About Eve left an imprint as one of the earliest mainstream films to blur admiration and attraction between women. Davis's sharp delivery of "Fasten your seatbelts, it's going to be a bumpy night" became iconic, but Eve's unspoken longing was the spark that rattled censors most. Bans couldn't erase what was there. Today, All About Eve is celebrated not only as a masterpiece of wit and drama, but also as a film that pushed boundaries by daring to leave its most dangerous emotion, female obsession, right in the spotlight. From silent epics like Salome to glossy musicals like Calamity Jane, these 15 films show how Hollywood's golden age wrestled with stories it wasn't ready to tell outright. Every ban, every cut, every hushed whisper only proved the power of what was hiding in plain sight: women sharing a connection that went deeper than friendship. So, which of these classics do you think pushed boundaries the hardest? Drop your thoughts below, hit like, share with a movie-loving friend, and don't forget to subscribe. After all, cinema's hidden past is always worth revisiting.